There is a lot of debate, right? Because when you talk about risk, generally we think of negative, right? Risk means it is a negative annotation toward it, right? But in a project management terminology, sometimes risk can be positive also, right? COVID happened, right? For certain kind of project, COVID is basically a risk, negative risk. But for certain kind of project, certain kind of activities, COVID gave them much more productivity for certain kind of work, right? So this is where the in normal language when we speak in English, dictionary meaning of risk means it has a negative impact, something which has a negative impact, which you anticipate might have a negative impact. But in project management terminology, there is something called negative risk and there is something called positive risk. Obviously, we know that as opportunity, right? So positive risk we call that as opportunity. So venture is a project. Outcome can be a product. Not necessarily always a product. It can be a service also. It can be a process also. It can be application also, right? So the idea is from path A to path B. At the end, path when you reach your milestone, when you reach your goal, you will have a tangible offering to the customer, right? It can be in terms of product, services, processes, or it can be an application also. During that path, during that journey, right, there will be certain favorable things which is coming toward you. That will be opportunity, positive risk. There might be certain unfavorable things. So that is nothing but your negative. So generally it is known as risk, right? So that uncertainty, so your caliber or your experience or expertise as a project manager will be kind of counted or will be validated in terms of how well you are able to anticipate that, right? Obviously, there will be something which is known as acts of God. Nobody can anticipate that. Even with all the development of science and technology, there are certain things which you cannot anticipate as of now, right? But for specific to your project, so when you are talking about the anticipating risk, all those parameters, anticipating risk on your scope, anticipating risks on your quality, resources, time, cost. So if you just go step by step, you'll be able to. And when I say anticipate, it is not necessarily everything, every assumption you are going to make. You have to discuss that with your project team member. Not necessarily that you will have all the knowledge about the project, right? And most of the times it is not. You overall knowledge wise, if you see, you might have 1% or 2% knowledge about the project scope and everything. So you have to connect with all the stakeholders to get overall idea about the project and anticipate what kind of situations might happen. If those situations are favorable, you will take that as opportunity. If those situations are unfavorable to your project, you will take those as risks. So idea of risk is if I'm able to anticipate in the beginning and I can plan for that, I can put that into my cost, I can put that into my schedule, then the impact will be less. But as and when I get my risk at the later end, right, the value of that risk is higher, right? The value, like the impact of that risk will be higher, right? So if you see, amount at stake keeps increasing because if I'm finding a risk at a implement phase or a closing phase, you have already completed all the coding, testing, and everything. And just a moment, I have a call. Okay, sorry for that. So the idea is, as a project manager or a program manager, if you're able to anticipate risks in the initial phase, initial or planning phase of the project, that is much better, right? Though the opportunity and risk keep decreasing, right? Because urgent, when you keep progressing in your project, number of opportunities, number of risks keep reducing. The impact, if you see amount at stake, keep increasing. Just imagine a scenario, you have already like written all the codes, tested it, your website or application is going to launch. Then suddenly a very critical bug or something which you did not like kind of anticipate has come, right? It will again like lot of checks, lot of time, lot of effort will be required to kind of do those changes, right? And towards the end, it becomes very difficult because when you are committed something to the customer or to outside world, you have to like complete all those things within due time. Otherwise, customer will lose faith on you, right? And that is where within the short period of time you have to make such so large changes, right? That is where you have to like I said, your biggest skill set or expertise will come if you are able to anticipate or talk to. So when I say anticipate, do not take that somebody will sit and anticipate what can happen. Not like that. You have to communicate. You have to coordinate with all the stakeholders. Take their viewpoint. What can happen? What can go wrong? Then consolidate that list and try to find all the kind of contingency plan for each of those risks. So the idea of risk management is first obviously identification what can happen, then analysis, trying to find out that if this is a real risk or not, right? When first identification, then analysis of it, then depending upon what is the probability of that happening and impact, right? We generally consider two parameters for each risk. What is the probability of that risk of happening, and in case that risk happens, what is the impact? Then we take a for each risk we create a score, multiplication of probability into impact. Depending upon which the risk has larger score or higher score, we consider that to be taken first, to be for our planning contingency plans to be decided for those risks first. Integration of risk management activities, your other project management functions, right? Because whenever there is a risk, your contingency plans might be in terms of scope, right? It might impact your scope or cost, your quality, or your time also, right? So where the risk is impacting and how you are going to mitigate that, right? And project risk management is proactive. That means you are planning from the beginning, right? So it is not that preventive. Because once risk happens, it is no longer a risk. It becomes a issue. Then you have to. So it has to be handled in a different way, right? So for each project, there is something called issue tracker. So some risk which you are not able to anticipate and suddenly some problem happened, right? So that becomes a issue. So methodology, how you are going to manage risks, right? So different organizations will have different methods, like somebody who is using agile methodology, right? This sprint or Scrum. So they have a different method where the Scrum Master, product owner, team member will come together every 1 week, discuss about what can happen wrong. In a waterfall or the traditional project management methodology, so you will decide who is going to take a call, who will be the owner of each risk, right? Roles and responsibility, budget and schedule, right? This is somewhere which is in the control of the project manager, right? Because scope is something which is from the owner, which is from the customer, right? You might not able to make much changes on that. It is not that some risk happens, you are going to reduce your scope unless owner agrees. But what is there? Because you can in the beginning you can plan for the budget. In case this risk happens, how much additional money I'll be requiring, right? Let's say this IPL is happening or any project is happening. If let's say rain happens, suddenly rain happens for next 3 or 5 days, what is the alternative plan of action? Can you do those matches in house, indoor, or can some alternative plan can be done in case the matches do not happen, right? So that is where your contingency plans in terms of additional money or additional time, right, has to be there, right? Then risk categories, also a risk breakdown structure, from which side the risk is coming, right? So there are different, like you created that cause and effect diagram, right? So the causes can be from the processes side, people side, management side, raw material, material side, right? So there are different ways causing that effect, right? Effect of that ceiling or that roof collapsing, right? What can be the causes? So that you are anticipating. Cause and effect diagram, which you did in the last exercise, that itself is a risk identification tool, right? Then this is what I was talking about, probability and impact for any risk you are identifying. So then the question is, how will you decide the probability, right? Almost if it is a like a existing company, so already project has been conducted, number of project has been executed for that company, right? So they will have previous learnings from the project, right? So they know that okay, this what is the probability. So in that or something called organizational process asset OPA, so they will have something called risk log, right? These are the risks can happen, and this is the probability of happening. But if let's say it is a startup or it is a small company, they do not have that kind of documentation or those kind of softwares, right? Obviously, brainstorming. You have to get together along with your team and say that okay, what is the chance of this happening, right? So all of you will decide on a probability. Then, in case that happens, what is the impact of that risk, right? Then revised stakeholders tolerances, right? Some risk where there is no tolerance, right? It cannot happen, we have to avoid as much as possible that, right? Then there are different mitigation tactics, so which I'll show you. How do you track that risk? If let's say there is a risk which is suppose, let's say this mm, COVID, uh, that might be a risk for many projects that COVID wave 3 or 4, whichever is the next wave might come, right? So how you track that, right? So that is where somebody, some person, some resource from your team has to be assigned for particular that risk, right? And he will be tracking or he will be responsible for tracking, managing or mitigating that risk. Then documentation, which is very much required in a, like I said, it is not a one-time action. Every week or so that time need to be defined every week or every 15 days. You have to kind of coordinate with all your stakeholders, check that which risk might happen in soon, which risk has been already closed. If you have some action plan for that and you have already closed it, then you can close that risk. So risk identification. So remember, risk management has 4 steps, basically 3 steps: risk identification, risk assessment, where prioritizing will happen. Then you go risk planning, right? A risk, like in case risk happens, what is the contingency plans, right? So risk management has 3 steps. First you identify, then you assess what can be the probability and what can be impact, then prioritize. So prioritize will come under assessment. Then last is risk planning, right? Mitigation, risk mitigation planning. So in the first step, obviously, which you did in the earlier class, something like a cause and effect diagram, Ishikawa diagram, you can draw. Brainstorming, Delphi technique, similar to brainstorming, but here everybody is writing there. Because in brainstorming, what happens if all together start speaking? Most of the times, people only will forcefully talk about their ideas. They will not be listening to the other person. Here in Delphi method, everybody writes down their idea, and one by one, idea has been discussed. Then failure mode effect analysis, we have discussed in the previous class. There is something called a risk preference number, similar to risk register. Then there is something called in case of this kind of construction companies, construction or infrastructure project, or like process refining and all those things. There is something called HAJO, hazard and operability study, something related to like environment, something related to your safety of people. So those kind of studies can be done. Then there is a checklist. If it is an existing company, so they will have a list of risk which has happened in previous project. You can just take that and say that okay, whether there is a chance of this risk happening, right? Most of the time, the program management team office will have that kind of list. Then WBS scrutinization, right? But WBS is nothing but your work breakdown structure. So each of the tasks, one by one, you check and say that what might go wrong, right? If and scenario analysis, right? Then risk symptoms and triggers, right? When will you know that this risk might happen, right? Let's say one of the risk is you are like kind of construction, you are constructing something and one equipment has to be imported, right? So purchase order is being placed and the import duration is 6 months. That means it will take at least 6 months to import that material. So you need to have a trigger for that, right? Because see, there are 1,000 or 10,000 line items in a project. If it is a very big project, project manager or program manager, even if you divide your work among different team leads, you will not remember after 6 months down the line. So each task, if it has a risk, it should have a alarms kind of thing, right? It should have a trigger. Okay, 5 months have passed. Uh, we have checked with importer. So let's say today is April 29th. Let's say today we have released a purchase order and we anticipate there might be delay in this order, right? So we should have a risk trigger 3 months or 4 months down the line that okay, so during after 4 months in August or September there will be a trigger saying that okay, now you go and check with the importer, right? Whether he is going to meet the duration of within next 2 months or 1 month he is going to deliver or not, right? So that is where risk triggers are inbuilt in most of the project management softwares, right? It kind of works as an alarm, right? Because as a project manager you cannot remember all the tasks. Risk breakdown structure, this is something which you have a glimpse in a cause and effect diagram, right? So risk might happen due to different regions, right? So there will be certain external risks which as a project manager you might not have control, but you have to plan for that. Legal processes, economic nature, calamity which is happening, political, certain things. Let's say this Ukraine war has happened. Let's say some material has to come from Europe, Ukraine or Europe or from Russia. Right now, if war has happened, obviously that will be impact on you, right? Social, in the social structure wherever it is being implemented, some kind of project which has an impact on the those people, environment, right? That is something again. And most of your construction infrastructure projects get delayed due to this social, economic, and natural causes rather than your internal risks. So it is like have an impact on the tribal people or the indigenous people, and it might get closed, right? If you have not done that risk assessment in the beginning. Internal risk, obviously, resources, human factor, contractual. Contractual means some of the work which you have given to contractual resources, vendors, third-party workers, if they are not able to meet their deadlines. Technical, this is if you look into internal risk, this is one of the biggest challenge in this kind of R&D projects, right? Any new product development, most of the times, technical will be the most biggest one because if you do not have the technology and you have started work on the project product development or application development, that is where the challenge will happen. For a software project, human resource, and that is where the most of the companies, at least the Indian IT companies, keep a lot of people in bench. It is not that they know that they are losing money paying salaries to them, but only concern is that because they know that in case some project suddenly some people leave, they will have a lead time of 3 to 4 months to recruit a new resource, right? So it is better to have some people 5% or 3% of your employee in bench so that in case there is a requirement that can be fulfilled very quickly, right? So these are different type of management risk. Sometimes your stakeholders management might have very unrealistic goals, right? They might say that yes, this you have already done this kind of project complete within 3 months, which is not at all possible, right? And you cannot convince them. That is where the you know that this project is failed from the beginning, but still you continue with that, right? Any questions up to this point? So first is risk identification. Like we discussed, you either do brainstorming, cause and effect analysis, failure mode effect analysis. There are different methods where you identify, right? Most of the times, it is very simple. You discuss with your project team members who have worked in similar project. Just ask them what might go wrong, right? As simple as that. Then list down those ideas, list down those issues. In case it is an established company, they will have a record, checklist kind of thing. In past project, this kind of risk has happened. So once you have identified that risk, right? So either you can do a qualitative analysis where you are just saying that okay. So in a category you are putting those risks, whether it is a very high level risk, low level risk, or a moderate level risk. So high level risk red, moderate yellow, low level risk is green, right? And that is requires common understanding of ordinal ranking system. Ordinal means you are putting into order: low, medium, and high. Maybe less precise than quantitative analysis, but most of the times, 99% of the times, we start with this qualitative, right? Then once we segregate, prioritize, then we jump into quantitative. Quantitative means we put a numeric value. So what will be the impact of that risk? If I say that rain might happen and some matches might have to be conducted indoor, or some additional other venue, alternate venue need to be decided, need to be kept as a backup in case rain happens. So we'll switch to that venue to conduct that match, right? So it has an impact, right? It has some additional cost, because if you're changing your venue, whatever additional flight tickets, hotel booking, then that venue fees, ticketing, you have to return your money, might be to the those customers, right? Then all those things again has to happen, right? So that is the additional cost. So that is nothing but your impact due to that risk. This is the cost you have to plan for that, right? So it has a numeric value. Or your overall schedule might get delayed, so that is the impact on your schedule. Impact either on the cost or scope or schedule or quality. Generally, as a project manager, you have to kind of very careful not to touch scope and quality, because quality and scope you have guaranteed to the customer. You cannot make any changes to them. Only thing what you can anticipate or what you can make a plan about: schedule, right? You can ask for additional time from the beginning, right? And that is where it is proactive. Or you can ask for additional money, saying that this is a risk buffer. In case this risk happens, we have to have this kind of buffer, or we need to have this kind of additional budget. So qualitative ones first we'll discuss. Qualitative ones basically probability and impact matrices, top 10 risk item tracking, and expert judgment. So like I said, most of the times it is expert judgment. Just check with your team members, outside experts, what might go wrong, and accordingly list down your risks, right? So where you have these kind of inputs, so you create a risk register. I'll show you the template. A risk management plan is nothing but where all those details are mentioned. Who will be the owner of that risk? What is our um, matrices which you are going to use? Uh, who are like kind of going to manage those documentation? So all those things are as a management plan is written down. Then obviously project scope statement. We are trying to make no changes to that. Organizational process assets. Some companies will have this kind of checklist, right? But if it is a new company, they might not have. Then this is something again, tools and techniques. I'll show you some of this. It is very simple. So I find out the probability, right? I do not put a number. I say that, okay, what is the probability of that risk happening, right? Risk number 6, which has a impact of very low. Even if that risk happens, it has a very low impact, but probability is very high, right? So what happens once you put in this order? Again, it is very qualitative. When is a qualitative, it is basically based on your assumptions, right? How you think, how you anticipate that, you and your project team members. If you say risk 1 and 4, they have high impact and high probability. So my first action as a project manager will be to have a contingency plan of this risk 1 and 4. Need to have a backup plan. Okay, this is major risk. Rain might happen in next 1 week or 2 weeks. We need to have a backup plan. And this will be the additional cost or additional impact on schedule or time for this, right? So it is a very kind of visual, in a very easy manner. You can create a dashboard, say that, okay, I have 10 or 12 risks, and this is the structure of those risks. And this is how I'm going to plan for this. So for risk 1, this is my plan. For risk 4, this is my plan. Then you can think of which should be next one, whether risk 9, which is very high probability, medium impact, or risk uh, 12, which is very low probability but high impact, right? Depending upon your stakeholder, like how much tolerance they have for the risks, right? Some people or some management where there is no tolerance, right? So they will try to take that all those risks which are very high probability and medium probability. So try to mitigate all those risks, remove those low risks, right? But if you can have some kind of tolerance, like less tolerance means Even if some risk happens, right, you will have some bandwidth to kind of manage them, right? Because sometimes if the stakeholders or the owner says no matter what happens by this December your product need to get released, so you do not have any bandwidth or tolerance for each risk. You have to go step by step, put a contingency plan so that that risk doesn't happen. Even if it happens, it doesn't impact you a lot, right? If that stakeholders have some tolerance, okay, they are willing in case something unfortunate happens, we can delay the project launch by 2 months, then you'll have a lot of flexibility, right? Other way is top 10 risks. So every week or every 2 weeks, you discuss with your team members. So the idea is you cannot handle everything at a single point of time, right? So whatever qualitative risk analysis we are doing something called risk assessment and prioritization, right? We're trying to find out which we can handle at this point of time. Because if I start to manage all 100 risks, all of my time effort will get into that only, right? So here, like we say that, okay, so in my first page, if my criteria is whichever risk has high probability and high impact, I will manage them first, then I'll look into others. So here also similar manner, if let's say I have 100 kind of different risks identified, every week we'll decide which risk has the top priority. So let's say last month, this poor definition of scope, absence of leadership, let's say your top software architect, he has left, CIO has left. So that is absence of leadership. So that was the major risk last month. But when you come to that this month, inadequate planning has become the topmost risk, right? So each month, generally we do it in every 2 weeks, right? So every 2 weeks or every month here as it's shown, you discuss with your project stakeholders which is the top 10 or top 5 important risks, and we try to manage that. Then in the next month, there will be some other top 5, top 10 major risks, right? Expert judgment, anyhow, we know, so I'm not going to discuss that. So there are 3 qualitative risk analysis method: expert judgment, brainstorming, then top 10 risk tracking, then your probability and impact matrix, right? So when you get into the quantitative risk, so in quantitative risk, the like difference between qualitative and quantitative is we are again putting that probability and impact, right? But here we are putting a number to it. So in qualitative, what happens? High probability and high impact. So when I say high probability, so what is that? 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, 0.8. And when I say high impact, what will be impact on my, so to where it will impact, whether it will impact my cost or schedule. Obviously, it can impact the scope or quality, but as a project manager, my aim will be not to let that risk impact my scope and quality, right? So this is where we talk something of expected monetary value, simulation and sensitivity analysis. Expected monetary value works if some of you have gone through decision tree. It is kind of a decision tree, right? So let's say, and this we had discussed in the beginning, like when we discussed on the project screening, right? Which project I should take, right? So there, if I say that I have 2 projects, the success of this project is 20% only, right? And if I get that project success, I'll get a revenue of $300 or $300,000 per year, right? But there is a 80% chance that this project might get uh, rejected or this project might get failed, right? And in case I fail, this $40,000 will be lost for me because this is my total project cost. So expected monetary value will be 0.2 multiplied by 3 lakhs, $3 lakh, so $60,000. 0.8 multiplied by 40,000, that is minus $32,000. So expected monetary value from project 1 is 60,000 plus minus 32, that is $28,000. Similarly, I'll calculate for project 2. There is a chance that this project will fail 20%. I'll lose $50,000. 0.10% in the initiation page when I'm starting the project, then I might lose $20,000. There is a success chance of 70%. There I'll only get $60,000, right? Again, I calculate individual expected monetary value, add them up. So here expected monetary value is $30,000, right? So in case I know that, again, these numbers, there is no kind of a calculator. There is something which will give you what is the probability and what is the impact. Only thing is that this has been discussed and decided by the project team members, right? So this is how you choose your project. Same thing here. If rather than project, I am taking a action plan 1 and action plan 2, right? So if I take this plan or if I take this task, let's say there is a ISRO is carrying out a spaceship launch to outer orbit of Earth, right? So they can use certain modules which is built in-house, right? Or they can just procure it from Europe or USA, right? So that is two different tasks, two different activities, right? If I build it in-house, if I build that module in-house, that is my task. Success rate is 20% only, but I'll save around 3,000 because I'm not buying it from outside. I'll save this much money. So my profit to the project will be around $60,000. But there is a very big chance of failure, which is 80%, right? Then minus 32,000 will be my loss. So if you think in this way, for each task, each activity, I can have multiple options to do that same task in a different way in case a risk happens. So what will be the impact of that? So that is nothing but your expected monetary value. Again, like if it is established company, there are a lot of rules, lot of information will be available. If it is a startup or a new company, everything need to be in a discussion or a kind of a brainstorming basis, right? Any questions on this calculation? And then we'll discuss both sensitivity analysis and simulation together. Uh, Most of the times, the EMB, expected monetary value, is the easiest way. Then, in yes, sir. Tell me.
Sir, in the previous one, sir, slide,
Yeah.
how can we relate our project with that, sir? Can you please explain it once?
Which project?
Sir, suppose the project which you have given to us.
Yeah.
So on that basis, sir, how
So
can we relate here? Yes, sir.
yeah. So rather than a project, let's say you are like one of the key criteria is choosing an actor, right? So if I take an example, let's say choosing an actor, choosing a superstar, or choosing a newbie, right? So what is your project success? How much money that movie will earn, right? So if you take a newbie, sorry, if you take a like a superstar or a existing reliable actor who is already in the industry, your success chance of this much, let's say, for example, some success chance will be there, some failure chance will be there. So that easily you can calculate based on his that star's a kind of previous movie records, right? If he succeeds, what is the average revenue you'll get from movie? In case he fails, obviously you will lose that amount of money which you are paying to that star, right? So that is your loss. So what is the total expected monetary value if you take that superstar? Because if you are taking a superstar, you have to pay maybe 20 crores or 30 crores per movie. So that is your cost. In case the movie fails, movie becomes a flop in the box office. So you are losing that 30 crores or 35 crores, right? But if it kind of becomes a super hit or it becomes a mega hit, so whatever incremental due to that star power, so that is your earning, that is your additional money. So you just have to find out what is the probability. So now the question is how will you find probability? So for your project, that is something which you have to anticipate because there is no actual director or producer who will be able to help you. But actual scenario when they are there, they'll be discussing, okay, so in the past few movies, he is doing excellent. Let us take him. The probability will be very high, 80% or 90%. Probability of failure will be very less, 10% or 20%. Other way around, you can think of taking a newbie, right? Taking a like a somebody who has just gone through one or two movies and that has been flop, right? But you look into a lot of potential in that person, right? So there is a success chance is very low, but lot of potential there is in case that clicks, the storyline clicks with the actor or actress, that will become a super hit. So you'll get a lot of money out of it. But failure is also the probability of failure is also very high because that person do not have a very excellent record from the past. He is a new person to the industry. Then what will be lost? Whatever money you are going to pay to that person, right? So overall, you will calculate for that. So for that task, so here it is given as a project because I was giving that example of project screening. But for each task, you are trying to see that, okay, what are my alternative options? And you are comparing with your alternative options, right? Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So next is sensitivity analysis and simulation. Uh, Very rarely, unless you are doing working for space project, right? Very technologically advanced project like something like SpaceX or ISRO or NASA, what they are doing. Either we do a expected monetary value and sensitivity analysis. Sensitivity analysis or scenario analysis is basically think about a scenario, right? For any project for a product launch, what is my ultimate objective? To create a successful product, and that is how we create a business case. So the product manager will tell that, okay, if this product we are able to launch by December 2022, our annual revenue, average annual revenue in the next 3 years will be $1 million or $2 million, right? So that is the business case, that is the revenue part, and we'll compare with whatever cost we are going to incur in this year. Then we'll see that what is our NPV or IRR, right? But when you talk scenario analysis or sensitivity analysis, we try to play with that number because when the product manager says that this has a profit potential or revenue potential of $1 million or $2 million, rather than taking that number based on his words, let us try to change them. What happens in case the profit estimation or revenue estimations comes down by 20%, comes down by 40%, whether our project will still make a sense? Same scenario here when I say like kind of a my project cost, let's say as a project manager or a program manager, I estimate that it will cost me 20 crore rupees or 5 crore rupees to complete this project within by December. But that might not be correct. That might be increment of 20% or 30% of the cost. So what we are doing in a sensitivity analysis, in case my project cost increases by 20%, whether the project still makes sense, right? So again, we do it for each task, right? Not all the tasks, all the important tasks. So right now, let's say one task we have said that, okay, we'll be able to complete the shooting of this movie for post-production activities within 3 months or 2 months. But that is not a fixed date, right? What happens if it is delayed by 1 month? What will be the impact? Right? So that is how you do a scenario analysis. What happens if your, like, let's say main crews, like main actors leave? So that is again, you have to think of whether it can happen or not, right? Leave the shooting in between, right? So for each of them, you do a scenario or sensitivity analysis, right? Sensitivity, if you have a number, right, plus minus 10%, plus minus 5%, scenario will be if it is a qualitative nature, 1 or 0, whether that person will come to the, will leave the shooting or in between or continue with your shooting, whether something will happen or not, right? That is where you will compare that with scenario analysis, right? Then there is something called simulation. Like I said, we do not do a lot of simulation in normal kind of traditional project. Simulation will be required when you are not kind of confident on the result, right? Think about a product development or think about something like which ISRO or NASA or like SpaceX is building, right? So they're developing technology for something. So what happens? They are also not confident what will be the outcome result. Can you please keep on mute, Tibebu? So, so this is where your Monte Carlo simulation or different kind of simulation comes into picture. So we are trying to look into a different parameters. What is, and same thing if you remember, we are doing something in the program evaluation review technique also, right? Similar kind of step. For each task, you will create a probability model. Like what is the probability of this task being completed within certain time and within certain month, right? So if the probability is very less, so you create a risk plan for that, right? So, like I said, mostly if it is a project where technology is unknown, you do not have much knowledge about the technology, there are a lot of uncertainty. You create a different type of simulations, right? Your, let's say, this Manglayan, your their ISRO project, right? Sending people to moon or sending people outside orbit, right? So the lot of things can go wrong. So that is where they'll simulate this. If this module is not completed in time, what will be the overall impact on schedule? If these three system integration doesn't happen, how much additional time will be required? And let's say your transportation vehicle, whatever the fuel is required, that is not enough. What is our backup thing? Right. So for each scenario, they're building a simulation. What is the in scenario we are not looking to probability. We are just saying that this might happen or this might not happen, 0 or 1, and we are planning for the in case this happens. What is the our contingency plan for it? In simulation, what happens? We are finding a probability for it. What is the chance or what is the probability of this event happening? Right. This is where you will need to have a data because probability can be only calculated when you have certain information data. If you do not have data, you do not have any information, you cannot simulate that, right? So this is like kind of used whenever you have a less understanding of the technology is new and we are trying to simulate, right? Then this is important, how to create a risk register. This is the same template you have to use for that the class exercise what you have given, right? So EG, if you go one by one, risk ID is nothing but the risk number. What is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like that? You have to write risk statement. So you have to mention what kind of anticipation, what kind of risk you are assuming. Then probability. Probability is from 0 to 1. Close to 1 means very high. This might happen very high. So this is up to you, right? As a team, you can discuss and say that okay, this might happen. This is very likely, right? Then what is the impact? So it can impact on my scope, quality, schedule, cost. The idea is we try to keep our scope, quality, no or very less impact on scope or quality, right? But again, there are things that are like kind of certain risk which might impact our scope or quality. But like I said, as a project manager, I will try to avoid that, right? So overall, like let's say, like I said, this import of material which is 6 months, there is a risk that it might get delayed. So delay means it has impact on your schedule, right? So what we'll say probability is, let's say this is a very high probability, 0.8. It is going to impact schedule. What is my impact on schedule in a scale of again 0 to 1? So for each of them, it will be 0 to 1, right? Let's say schedule also it will impact very big. Let's say my total project duration is 12 months. It will impact schedule by 2 months. So 2 by 12 will be how much? 1 by 6, 16% is 0.16. So you can put schedule impact is 0.16 or zero point 0.2. Similarly, cost impact, let's say this some resources, let's say one of my risk is some resource, some software architect might leave because he has already shown intention that he is trying in different companies, he might leave, but he is a very critical resource for my project, right? So in that case, he leaves. So I have a very impact, obviously might impact my quality also, might impact my cost also, because getting a resource of same caliber is not possible. So I might have to outsource some work or get certain expert on contractual basis. So it might have a cost, let's say $20,000 or $30,000, which might be 5% or 10% of the overall project budget, right? So that will be the cost impact, right? So probability impact, let's say 0 to 1, your schedule cost. Similarly, quality again, we do not put in 0 to 1. We just say that, okay, whether it will be very high impact or low impact, right? Quality putting in percentage is little difficult. Same thing with scope also. It becomes very like how much changes in scope is happening. You can put in a percentage, but generally, unless it is a very critical risk, which will have an impact on schedule or quality, we try to avoid that. So the idea is to discuss and say that, okay, this is the probability of happening of this risk is very high, let's say 0.6, 0.8 or zero point 0.4, whatever you decide. Then what will the impact on that risk on schedule or cost? Let's say it is going to impact my schedule by 16%. So 0.16. Let's say my probability is 0.5, 50-50 chance. So 0.5 multiplied by 0.6. So it will be 0.08, right? So overall score is 0.08. So like that, I will mention it for all the risk, whatever I am writing down. Then for particular that risk, what is my response? So if that risk might happen, then what can I do to avoid those kind of risks? So my response can be, let's say for that software architect, uh, so talk with him, so understand his problems. If let's say it is related to salary, what about the maximum benefit I can provide? Let's say 20% increment on salary, right? So that is can be one mitigation plan. Or second mitigation plan is that need a backup. So I'll start that interviewing process. So by the time that person leaves, I have somebody else experienced software architect on board. So that is my alternative backup plan, right? Risk mitigation plan. So that risk response you have to write here. Then by doing that risk, by doing that, by doing that response, by carrying out that response strategy, what is the revised probability? So by taking out that response, you might reduce the probability or you might reduce the impact also, right? So you have to see that, okay, by having that discussion regarding salary or regarding having a alternate resource, what I'm reducing? I'm able to reduce the probability. Let's say if I have my backup is to talk with that person one to one openly, talking about what is the expectation on salary and try to match that, right? So in that case, what will happen? If that is my mitigation plan or that is my response plan, the revised probability will be reduced, right? Because I know that that is the only reason why that person is moving out of my company. Then I'll be able to reduce the probability of that person leaving my company, right? Then obviously it will have a less impact on my schedule cost. So it might become zero also. It will have no impact unless he only leaves, then it has certain impact. Then accordingly, what is revised score? Or it might happen that my response strategy is take an alternate resource, right? So take alternate resource. If I'm taking revised probability, still becomes same because that person is going to leave. That risk is going to happen. So 0.5 will remain 0.5. But what might happen? My schedule and cost, impact on schedule and cost might get reduced because now I have a backup person. So it will not become zero. It will have certain impact. So here schedule and cost was, let's say schedule impact was 0.16. So here it might become, rather than 0.16, we might have a delay of 0.04, 4% delay rather than 16% delay. So we might have 1 week delay rather than 2 months delay, right? So that you have to write. So probability still remains same, that person is still going to live, but your impact on schedule might come down. Then you will put that revised score, right? Whatever 0.5 multiplied by 0.04, 0.002, right? Then who is responsible? Then what are the actions they are going to do? So response, if let's say my response is to have a alternate resource for that software architect. So my actions will be talk to the HR manager, initiate recruitment process, follow up with HR manager so that we have a resource on board by within next 2 months, right? So those are my actions. Then status is open or closed. Then any comments like how it is happening. So every week or bi-weekly meeting, we have to update. So it is not that every time responsible party is that your kind of your project manager. So depending upon who is working, who is what kind of work, the responsible party will be that person, right? So this is how you create a risk register. Any questions, any doubt on this? I'll show you a similar example which I used to use my previous company. So almost same. So if you see, so additionally we used to have this. Is the Excel file visible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So basically same thing. If you say risk number, what is the risk status? Little bit different than the template what I saw. Which functional area, risk date when you identified that risk, what is the risk or failure mode, what is the potential effect, how it is going to, so whether it is schedule, quality, cost, or time, right? So that is something, sorry, scope, right? how it is going to impact. So schedule sleep, then probability 0 to 1 I have to put, then impact 0 to 1 I have to put. Score is calculated. What is my mitigation plan? Who is the risk owner? Then estimated probability. After doing that risk management, what is the estimated reduced probability? Estimated reduce impact, estimated mitigation score when you are going to complete it. Then we will say that what is my contingency plan, right? Then some additional tables are there here. But if you say the risk owner keeps changing, right? Depending upon which, so if it is a product management, there will be other persons associated with the, there are certain things related to finance, engineering. So which, whoever is going to manage that, right? So that person's name has to be there. So something similar to this you have to create for the exercise what I have given, right? So you have to say that, okay, obviously for you it will be open. What kind of function, what kind of area that delay might happen or that risk might happen, and then what is that risk? You have to write in little detail. What is the potential effect? What is the probability of that risk happening? What is the impact of that risk happening? Score, then mitigation plans. Who is the risk owner, right? In this case, risk owner, your team members, right? 4 or 5 members. So just to show that you can put different team members for different type of risks, right? Any questions, any doubt on this? So then how do we like kind of manage this? Obviously, the best case to avoid any risk, right? If I can avoid, I know that conflict is happening in Ukraine and Russia. If the risk of importing material is there from Europe, I'll try to find that similar material or similar vendor from China or US, right? Where to get into trouble if I know that that trouble might happen, or transfer, right? Otherwise, I'll take it. So most of the transfer of risk means you take insurance. That is where the insurance companies play with a lot of money. So transportation, there is a insurance for transportation, there is a insurance for fire, there is a insurance for any kind of activities, even for sea transportation, there is insurance for against piracy, sorry, pirates, right? Then mitigate. So when I know that I cannot avoid that risk is going to happen, right? How to mitigate? So here in mitigation only you create those contingency plans, right? Okay, I know that this might impact my project. What will be my mitigation plan, right? In terms of putting additional resources, additional money, or creating additional buffer of time, right? Lastly, if you cannot do anything, you know that no matter what you do, that risk is going to happen, right? Then you have to accept. So you will go to your customer and say that. So that is where your identification of that risk, if it happens during the initiation or planning phase, it is very good. Unfortunately, if you are not able to anticipate and it is happening in the end, let's say it is a software design and there is certain error in your software architecture, right? And you are able to find out in the late stage of the project, and there is nothing you can do. So nothing else. You have to go to the stakeholder, say that this mistake has been done. So we'll need another 2 months or 3 months, right? We cannot send a faulty product or a application with bugs to the customers, right? So that has a lot to do with cyber security. You cannot do that. So this is where like kind of like we saw in the beginning, right? If you're able to anticipate uh, along with your project stakeholders, team members, as many as risks possible in the beginning, you will have contingency plan for that, right? So for negative risks, for any kind of risk which has a negative impact on your project, either we avoid, transfer in terms of insurance, mitigate. Mitigate means we have a contingency plan and we try to avoid as much as possible, then accept. Even with mitigation actions, contingency plans, there will be some risk which will happen, right? Then you have to accept. Accept means you will take that blow, you will take that impact on either on the schedule or on your cost, and really on the scope or quality. That is somewhere you have to guard. Say that no matter what happens, I will not make any changes to scope or quality. In rare occasions only, you will have that kind of impact. Positive risks, opportunities, obviously exploit. So can anybody tell me what can be a positive risk? Example of positive risk. Anyone? So if you look into Russia-Ukraine war, that has become a positive risk for these companies like IOCL, HPCL, all these oil refining companies, right? Because Russia is giving a little bit discount on the crude oil from their country. And if you read the recent news, IOCL and HPCL has bought around 2 million barrel worth of oil in the next between August, right? Those oil barrels will be delivered by August, right? So that happened. Nobody anticipated that. That has come. That discount in today's world, if everything was normal, they would not have got. But that has become a positive risk for them, right? So they will be exploiting either you take if you do not have the storage space, you give it to BPCL or somebody else, state oil company, right? And that is what they're doing right now. So if you cannot exploit everything, you share it with your friends, right? And that is where if you I do not have the storage space to keep that many of oil barrels, they're sharing IOCL, HPCL, BPCL, they're sharing that storage space. Enhance, obviously not in this case, you cannot enhance, it is not that you are going to enhance or prolong that war between Russia and Ukraine. In some cases, yes, think about this work right now, a lot of companies are offering remote work because they have seen that for some work, some situations, productivity has improved from the workers. So they're trying to enhance. They're saying that okay, you can work from home or you can work in hybrid mode as long as. So that is where, like, let's say, employee attrition will also get reduced, right? Accept, obviously. So it is a good thing, right? In the earlier case, in a negative risk, accept means it is a bad thing. Here, obviously, something happening, some opportunity is coming. You obviously have to accept, right? Then whatever risk is there after a response also, if you see that it is not that probability is becoming zero or impact is becoming zero, there will be always some. So it is not that by taking that contingency plan, probability is going to become zero or impact is going to become zero. Depending upon your mitigation plan, either your mitigation plan will be to reduce probability or reduce your impact or both of them, but it can never become zero, right? So after your risk, whatever risk is there, after you take that contingency plan or the response, whatever risk is there. So if you remember that score, what we are calculating in the beginning, probability multiplied by impact, it was a score of 0.16. After taking my step, score is 0.08 or 0.04. So that is the residual risk, right? Whichever risk is remaining. Well, after taking my steps, after taking the contingency plan. Secondary risk is something different. By taking my action, let's say that step where the software architect was asking 20% is more salary, but I did not take that action of paying that 20% salary, rather than I hired another resource, right? So secondary risk might happen that when that person is leaving my company, he might take some better software developers who is reporting to him along with him. He might give them better opportunity in his new company, and he might take them with him also, right? So that will become a secondary risk, because my mitigation action was not to keep that person, because I thought, why to pay 20% more salary, let me hire another software architect from the market. But in that case, what happens? The secondary risk, that person who is going to leave my company, he will, along with him, he will take another one or two resources. Many cases it happens in software industry. If you lose a very good manager or a very good kind of a developer, along with him, some additional people also will leave your company, right? So that is a secondary risk. Any questions, any doubt on this? So the idea is, so initially whenever risk beginning, project schedule iteration. So if you see in the beginning part, if you're able to identify, mitigate all those risks, so towards the end of your schedule iterations, number of risks should significantly reduce. If you're not maintaining like this, your risk always in the top, total risk exposure is in the top. So your whole life, your whole day, every hour of your life will get into that risk mitigation. So that is where I have been talking about that. Okay, in the beginning itself of the project, talk to every project stakeholder, talk to every project team member, try to as much discussion as possible and try to gather that information. what might go wrong, right? Then accordingly have a contingency plan. So contingency plan is something like which we'll discuss, I think in the next slide is there, right? So if you remember when we are creating budget, right? So we have task, work breakdown structure. For each task, we see that what might go wrong, right? Then we put that money, we put that additional effort. So that is where you build a contingency plan. Contingency plan, in case there is a risk, you have that additional money or additional time for it. So it is not that you are going to use it, though it is in your as a control of the project manager. But in case the risk happens, it is not that okay, that risk did not happen, then we'll spend that money in something else. So you have to be accountable for that money, that effort, that time, whatever has been given to you. But that also might happen that uh, so there are certain unknown risks, unknown uncertainties, like COVID. 2 years back or 2.5 years back, nobody could have anticipated, right? So this is where your management reserve will come into picture. So contingency reserve, which takes care of all those known uncertainties. Management reserve, which so reserve is basically two types: contingency reserve, which is for the anticipate, which as a project manager and your team is able to anticipate, known. There is an uncertainty of that thing happening or not, but you can anticipate it. So that is known to you, known problems. But there will be certain unknown problems, unknown uncertainties, right? So for that, there is something called management reserve. Management reserve are for those risks that could not be identified during risk management process. Like COVID is a big example. So this is where you'll go back to your management who approved that project and say that this has happened, which we could not have anticipated. So give me additional time or give me additional money to complete the project. Fallback plan, these are the plan describe what will be done if the contingency plan is not effective. Think of this as plan B. So for a contingency plan also, we have a backup plan. In case we are not able to hire the additional resource. So if that is my contingency plan, my backup plan might be, okay, offer that 20% higher to the this resource, right? Or this can be my offering 20% higher salary to the software architect might be my contingency plan. In case he still says that no, I'm going to leave the company, then my backup plan will be have a plan B will be to start the hiring process, right? Risk triggers. So this is what I've told you. When you'll start taking a response, right? So it is not that every day, every week you are planning for 100 risks. So every week, every month, you will decide or work on that risk or that problems which might happen in that month. Then in the next month, again, we'll plan for that month. Secondary risk we have discussed, the residual risk we have discussed. Residual risk after taking contingency plan, which risk is remaining. So that is residual. Secondary, by taking a risk response strategy, what additional risks are happening, right? And contingency plan we have discussed, right? I think that's all about your risk management and risk strategy. Then any last question? Yes, well.
So I have one question, like, can risk be only positive? Sir? Means whatsoever we're discussing, the types of risk. Regarding that, means if you are taking up one project, like whatever project, if you are taking up for a future, and whatsoever if we are intent to do with that, if means regarding that project, if we intend to do something regarding that, and there we only seeing the positive result. Like recently, just yesterday, like one news I just came across, that is PVR and Inox, which came together just to extend the number of screens across India. So if you are seeing towards like this project, so can we say like if certain project can have only positive risk?
Not necessarily risk. Like I said, always rarely it will have a positive impact. Very few cases it will have positive impact. Risk ultimately means whether it is negative risk. If it is a positive risk, it becomes an opportunity, right? So yes, some event, some outcomes will have positive impact. Like I said, this oil refinery, or let's say this. Think about who is your stakeholder. Let's say some company or some investor is thinking of creating a multiplex chain. For that person, this whatever event has happened becomes a very negative risk, because if PVR and Inox are coming together, they'll become a superpower in India multiplex industry, right? So, kind of fighting them one on one will be fighting them combined will be different than fighting them one on one, right? So now, if like let's say for a company whose project, or for a like kind of investor whose project is to build a new multiplex chain, if that is the project, this news is becoming a negative risk, right? Because that is going to impact that what they now he has to think which cities. That's earlier what used to happen, only whenever PBR is there nearby, if he's putting a his new multiplex, then he can fight with that kind of multiplex. But now PBR Inox come together, they can play on prices, they can put new discount strategy, and this person who is creating a new multiplex might get into problem, right? So to answer your question, no, that is not so news or any event for an industry which is positive, for a different industry it might become negative, right? So same thing which is positive for us, for the companies like IOCL and BPCL and HPCL, same news is negative for ONGs, right? Because if I'm getting a better oil or better rate from outside India, I might not depend upon ONGs, right? So it depends upon whom you're talking about, who is your stakeholder. So same news, same information, same event might have a positive impact, might have a negative impact. COVID happened. Some industries had a positive impact, like there's pharmaceuticals, those PPE equipment manufacturers, right? So that industry actually grew. But other industry, if you see, that has a lot of manufacturing industry, other manufacturing industry has a lot of negative impact. Was that your question?
Yes, sir. It's like we can say it depends, but one project, like we can say one project has more percentage of positive risk and negative risk. So say like that.
Why do you think that will be more positive risk?
Because we are seeing only positive results after implementing certain rules and regulation, or after taking steps to merging with another company.
Can you please repeat, Habib?
So my doubt is, we can say like that if certain project, if you are taking up in future, that means that can only have more number of positive risk, means than what we intend to see negative risk attached with that project.
No, not necessarily, right? A lot of project you will not able to anticipate risk. If you like, let's say ISRO is going to launch something outside this orbit to Mars or some other planet, at this point of time they'll not able to. So when you say risk, the risk is not a war. So we always, like any project we take, we say that okay, if I have that anticipation of positive outcome is more than negative outcomes, I am going to take it. So, but risk will always be there. Risk is obviously about all the tasks. So what you are telling is overall outcome of the project. If I do not believe that there is a overall positive outcome of the project, I am going to take that project, right? So it is not about positive risk. It is about the outcome, right? Risk is about the event, what problem might happen. Outcome is my result. If I believe that okay, this project or this product will give me this much revenue, no matter how many risks is there, I'm going to take it. Risk I am going to mitigate, whether positive or negative. But if I believe that it has do not have a positive outcome itself, revenue is very low, I might not take that.
But the outcome eventually depends upon risk.
No, outcome, see how you manage risks. There can be situation there is no risks also. If you have done that project, there will be project with no risk. The risk is not mandatory, right? So if you, let's say this what are software projects, lot of companies who have been developing that same kind of work for a new customer, you will not face that many risks. But yes, if it is a new software development altogether, there might be eventually different kind of risk. So it is not necessary that you will always have risk for a project. If it is a new project, yes.
Yes, got it.
Okay, so that's all for today. Next class we'll discuss something called earned value management. That is important. There will be some calculation involved, right? I'll show you step by step. So please join next session.
I missed my attendance, sir.
Roll number.
So 140.
Okay. Anyone else?
Sir, 153.
153. Okay.